What I can tell you is that we're not too far away from actually releasing our next version of liquid loans. So there'll be a number of new enhancements and additions that the community will get to see and play around with. Whether that happens in the next week or the next 2 weeks depends on, there's a round of testing that we're having to do this Friday, actually, just to go through and test some of those new additions. But fundamentally, the community will then be provided with an update. And as per normal, I think we'll gratefully receive any feedback. We do expect that obviously once V3 is launched, there probably will be a need to reissue contracts again. We just have to wait and see if any of the contracts change and the addresses change. So we may need to release liquid loans again at that point. There's a number of things, and it's funny, people say, it's just bloody cut and paste. Just go over and get liquidity, just cut and paste, drop it in. There you go. Job done. I can tell you, it is nothing like that. And here's some of the frustrations that we've had, Adam, and that is because Pulse Chain is largely a new chain, right? So there's no infrastructure that's running on the chain. What does that mean? Well, we don't have things like GraphQL, for example. Now, some of what we provide through our Dapp is an analytics element of how's the protocol performing. So when you're generating some of that output, you have to aggregate. And a good tool to do that is GraphQL. Well, guess what? That's fantastic if GraphQL is up and running and working. But if it's not, then you have to launch it. So you're effectively having to launch the infrastructure as well. The other thing that we've been not struggling with, but we've actually got over some of the issues that we were struggling with earlier, and that is Gnosis Safe. So the community would like to have something like that. I think Gnosis Safe is a fantastic product, but guess what? It doesn't exist on Pulse Chain. And if you want to have anything like a multi-sig on Pulse Chain, well, guess what? You have to launch it. So we've actually been working on running Gnosis Safe in the background to help with, so some of our deployment requires us to deploy multi-sig wallets. And as a consequence of that, we will be using Gnosis, and we're testing a lot of that as we speak. But the community will have an opportunity of using something like that. But here's it's not a frustration, but it's a frustration in terms of people's perceptions of how easy this is to actually make happen. It's never bloody easy. And I'll tell you why it's not easy. It's because we take responsibility for bringing Gnosis to Pulse Chain, and we're going to use it for what we need to use it for. But we have a sense of responsibility of making sure that, okay, let's make sure that every other aspect of this is tested fully. So if the community wishes to use it for their own personal use, that we know that at least we've done enough testing for it so that they can actually go ahead and use it and feel safe that it's working fully. So there's an element of we're having to roll out all this additional infrastructure. And probably the biggest one for us, and thankfully we've partnered with Tellor. I think I may have mentioned Tellor to you before. But one thing that we don't have on Pulse Chain is an Oracle service. Now, there's a view that says, you can just go straight to a DEX, and we will be using PulseX, no doubt about it. But the reality is that fundamentally, that can also be manipulated. So if you only have one price feed, it's a challenge. So what do you really need? You need a decentralized Oracle, a truly decentralized Oracle that not only rewards people for providing the right prices, but also discounts them if they don't, or penalizes them if they don't. And Tellor is an absolute fantastic model for us to do that with. Now, we're partnering with them to actually deploy a version of Tellor on Pulse Chain. Now, none of that exists. The best outcome for us would have been, you know what? Chainlink exists, Tellor existed. There was a whole bunch of other infrastructure that existed on Pulse Chain. Well, guess what? None of that existed. So we've had to bring that to bear, because if we don't, then our protocol and our project could be at risk if we don't do the right things in those spaces.